Hi, everyone. Welcome to Brothers, Sisters, Strangers video podcast. I'm Ali-John Chaudhary, psychotherapist, and I'm here today with Fern.
Hi, I'm Fern Chapman, the author of the upcoming book, Brothers, Sisters, Strangers, Sibling Estrangement and the Road to Reconciliation. Always happy to be with you.
Great for you to be here, Fern. It's wonderful to have you here again. And today we have an interesting topic, and I know we have a lot to say about this. So this might be a video that's a little bit longer, but you know what? It's a subject that interests the both of us, and I suspect our viewers also. So today's theme is going to be on bereavement and sibling estrangement. So I know you have a lot to say about that too.
I have a lot to say about this because it is very difficult to grieve a living relationship. And it's very different from a death. And the pain of estrangement is unimaginable. And actually, some of the survey respondents describe some of that pain with really vivid words like estrangement is like a bad toothache or a bad tooth that's always pulsating with pain, or that it's a wound that never heals. And some even said that after 25 years, they were still hurting from the fact that their siblings stopped talking to them. I know that pain, and I think what struck me when I was in the worst of it is that death is final, and you must accept that somebody dies. But with estrangement, that person you're grieving is still walking the earth, and that always keeps the door cracked open for some possibility of a relationship. And that's why it's so hard to grieve it, but also keep that little bit of possibility open.
That's very true, Fern, and I agree with you. I think that that's really an issue that a lot of us have to go through, and you're right. It's its own special type of mourning, and I know that there's a lot out there on mourning and on grieving strategies and stages and such, and I kind of wanted for us to go through a bit of a theory that I like, that I think is really important, because I found one that has to do with what's called the tasks of mourning. And of course, I've adapted this to sibling estrangement because it's its own particular grief, and there's not really that much out there when it comes to theories of grief related to sibling estrangement. So I've done a bit of adaptation with regards to this one. So so what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about this aspect of the tasks of mourning, and I think that it's a good one because it's a type of approach that's very encompassing, and the thing with this one is that it goes into action in terms of what we think we can do that can of course be things that we can work on as we're going through this mourning process. And a lot of the different theories out there are in stages or in phases, and the problem with that is that they can sometimes be seen as being passive or taken too literally. So I really like this one because this one gives us a sense of leverage, and it's something that we can actively engage in with regards to grieving our sibling relationship. So let's get into it then, shall we?
Well, and then one comment I want to make is that it's a process where the stages kind of become cyclical rather than it's, and that can create a sense of stuckness. So it's a challenge as far as your approach to grieving, and here are your stages. But a lot of times you keep slipping back into the stages.
Yeah.
And that creates this sense of frustration and, like I said, stuckness, so that you don't know if you're making progress at all.
I agree, and I think that's the thing too, the danger of crystallization, the danger that you're stuck in that particular stage. And I think that it's important not to take these too literally. You know, these are theories with regards to that, and they should be fluid. And you could be working on some of these tasks all at once. You could be going with 2 and 3 all at once, you know, or 1 and 4, you know, or just 1, you know. So So it's perfectly fine. And I think that that's important, that we maintain a certain fluidity, as you're alluding. So, so number one task, basically, task number one is to accept the reality of the loss. And sometimes we deny our feelings of sadness, anger, or another type of emotion with regards to our sibling pushing us away. And that's because these feelings that arise usually cause us a lot of pain, regret, hardship. And sometimes we fall into a form of denial that can numb ourselves from the overwhelming feeling. So denial sometimes serves us, but other times it doesn't. And sometimes it can be pushed to the extreme if we're not careful because of this defensive mechanism. And sometimes there's some people that might just basically try to take away any type of material objects that reminds them of their sibling. It could be that they avoid places that their sibling frequents. It could be that they're avoiding other people that know them, or trying to block memories by denying the very feelings, behind the existence of the loss, that by claiming that it doesn't do anything to us.
I'm guilty of charged of all of those things. Avoiding the locations, avoiding the people, avoiding the memories. I was all about it.
Yeah, and that's the thing too with this type of approach, is that basically we think we're doing something good, but yet we're reacting to that loss. And if we don't deal with what's behind the curtain, then we're just basically stuck in that feeling. So there's a concept I've read about called middle knowledge, and it comes from existential philosophy, and it has to do with not knowing and knowing at the same time. So when it comes to mourning, it's the idea that we can believe and not believe at the same time. So it's something that affects us with regards to the reality of the painful loss and the relationship with our sibling, because it is an ambiguous loss. So in some ways, it can manifest in some shape or form as denial, and yet still have the person, be very much alive and carrying on, so they choose to not have a healthy relationship, if any, with us. So that's the thing with this reality, is that it's that type of ambiguity, that middle knowledge, that we sometimes have to compose with, that sometimes pushes people into denial. So that's task one.
Well, and it seems to me that in general, it's really impossible to be in two mind states at the same time. So calm and angry, happy and sad, hateful and loving. So I can only imagine how hard it is to hold those two thoughts at the same time.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. So I mean, if we're busy, we're so busy with one feeling, then we're really closing the door in some ways to a lot of other feelings. And that's the thing. It's, if you're in one, then you're not allowing for the other to come in. So definitely.
And I think there's a real desperation on the part of the person who was shunned to possibly get that relationship back in balance. And as a result, they lose themselves. In other words, they become inauthentic in their desperation to repair the relationship.
Well, that's the thing too, and I completely agree. It's that basically we're trying to shut off a part of ourselves, kind of like a room that we turn the light off and we don't go into that room, It's something that we need to do every now and then. We need to, of course, clean up that room. We need to go into that space and, of course, recognize that. So task two talks to us about the process and pain of grief. Now, denial kind of gives us that feeling of avoiding the pain, feeling the pain in that sense, and the dysphoria associated with the loss. So the thing with this one is that it's people in society will sometimes put pressure on us, in particular with this type of grief with sibling relationships. The idea that, oh, well, you should be making it work, those type of things that come out, and just they really ignore the reality of the loss. You shouldn't be ignoring family. These different types of messages that just basically just again contribute to minimizing those feelings, which can sometimes keep us in denial and question ourselves. And
well, the pressure is especially high because you have family members who want these relationships to work.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, that they want for siblings to get along, especially parents, right? They really do want for their kids to get along, because again, it's very painful for them to see that and observe that if they're not actually participating in the problem and in that way. So another thing that happens also is that some people in the beginning stages, if they've had a cutoff with a sibling, they can sometimes feel empowered with that. And sometimes we have to do estrangement for our own sake. There are some people, some of our viewers have chosen to estrange their sibling because of certain behaviors that they feel are inappropriate. So you may be more focused on the freedom from a difficult, if not toxic, relationship when you're going through that. And yet, at the same time, you can't deny the fact that there's a loss associated to the other person, even if it's for the right reasons. And while this can be a good thing on the surface, the thing with that, though, is that it can leave us in what I like to call an empowered victim status. And, it basically what we're doing when we're in that phase is that we're disclaiming the effect of the loss on us, and yet letting it continue to define us, paradoxically.
I think that's a really good point. And I have noticed in some of the chat rooms that there is a tendency to constantly reinforce that victimhood. And I think it's dangerous to be on those chat rooms. Not that we shouldn't offer support, of course, but to get that reinforcement of, oh yeah, that's terrible, and why did he do that, and you were wronged. And that's a dangerous pattern as well.
I agree, and I think that we see this sometimes in certain movies or media. I'm thinking here of American Beauty there, the Annette Bening character at the end of the movie. It's actually interesting because she thinks she's empowering herself, and yet she's digging herself deeper into her own pattern of victimhood. So it's very important to be able to recognize this when this happens, especially if we get into adverse ways of denial and such. So task 2 really talks to us about being able to access these unwanted and unpleasant feelings. And this is what this task is all about, because if we don't deal with this in due time, it comes back with a vengeance, and it can cause us to have to work harder at processing some of these feelings, sometimes in therapy. And it becomes more of a challenge to address in our private lives, especially if family's been contributing to the problem, as you said earlier, by enabling difficult behaviors that end up in power struggles and can create otherwise toxic situations. And it takes courage, of course, to look at feelings of loss and ensuing feelings of anger, guilt, depression, and loneliness that can likely occur.
I was struggling with all of that for a very long time, and I'm not really sure how you get yourself out of it. One of the ways that helped me is writing. And of course, there is the emotional writing, which is different from writing for a general public. But that emotional writing, where you actually take 20 minutes a day and just put down all your pain and thoughts without any care for the craft, was effective for me. But I don't know, it's a challenge to figure out how to face this head on.
It certainly brings up a lot of feelings and invokes a lot of questions, as in, where do I start? What should I do? And there's a couple of exercises I'd like to talk about that might be helpful for some of our viewers also if they want to work with this. There's an exercise I like that's called basically what's in the box. It's actually a type of exercise that comes from emotion-focused therapy, and it talks about the idea of actually imagining yourself putting your hand around a box that contains some of those difficult emotions. So it can feel very threatening to explore some of that, but yet if you contain them in a box and you want to explore them and you want to put words to the experience, even just learning to touch that box, learning to open that box up just a little bit of a crack. How does it feel? How does it feel to put your finger into the box, or maybe your whole hand, and just letting that, again, define some of those feelings. Is it hot? Is it warm? Is it cold? Is it fuzzy? Is it prickly? So again, if you're able to put words to these feelings, you're already starting to access them in a way that's on your own terms. And of course, you can always close up this box if you feel, okay, I've had enough. I think this is a lot for me, so I'm going to just close this up for today. And you can certainly do that. So there's all sorts of ways where we can use active imagination to be able to use some of these tools that are helpful for us. Another one, of course, is empty chair dialogue. If we have certain feelings of anger towards our sibling, we can imagine that they're sitting with us and actually just basically telling them how we feel. Now, you can let those feelings arise within you. You can do it in a very rational way if you prefer, but you can, of course, do this for a fixed amount of time according to your level of comfort. And again, if you're not sure whether you should be doing this alone or not, you can also do this in therapy. This is also something that if you feel it brings up too much, then start with the first exercise and maybe do that exercise with your therapist, the empty chair later on. So if you feel the need in that way to have somebody else there, but these are the type of exercises that can be helpful to access those feelings.
I actually did some variation of the empty chair when I was in the worst of it, and that was I wrote letters but never mailed them.
I like that, actually. I think that's quite good because you bring it out. You find ways and words to bring it out, and I think that's very powerful. So yeah, I completely agree. I think that that's another good way and safe way, of course, to access some of those feelings. So number three, basically, task number three, according to Worden, basically is to adjust to a world without our sibling. So there's basically three areas of adjustments that need to be looked at with regards to the loss of relationship. These would be the external adjustment, the internal adjustment, and the spiritual or value-based adjustment. So in terms of what's external, it might be that some skills were never really developed much within your family, perhaps due to what was said to you or of you by your sibling. So you may find that there's certain activities that you may want to try yourself and maybe see how you do and handle certain situations that would have otherwise been somebody else's role, which you were discouraged from doing initially. And the successful completion of these tasks invariably gives us the confidence that we're able to accomplish them despite our sibling or our family's words and gestures of discouragement. This is an opportune time also to examine what meaning we can make of the loss of a relationship. And this is where the inner work, of course, can occur in this particular task. Now, internal adjustment, I think that that's something that we can all look at in terms of the shakeup that can affect our self-esteem, our self-image, our overall sense of self-efficacy. Usually this is what we are left with having a poor relationship with our sibling. And an example of a goal to work on would be to maybe develop yourself more as a whole as opposed to maybe being half of something else. Oftentimes when we're in enmeshed families, it's harder to see ourselves as a separate part, and we sometimes fall into negative influences about ourselves according to our families or our siblings' false perspectives. And eventually we start to build and carry on in the world according to our own terms instead of theirs. So, yeah.
So living authentically becomes key. I mean, I think you're right. One of the big problems in these very dysfunctional families is you don't know where you end and that other person begins. But I did have one other thought that I wanted to share with you, and that is one of the ways that you heal trauma effectively is to actually create it into its own service. So one of the reasons I write is because in some ways I'm healing all of the trauma from my mother's history and my difficult relationship with my brother, and it becomes a service for others. And I think that that's an important point, that how can you take something that's been so profoundly traumatizing in your life and actually make it into a service or a community effort that might not just help others, but help you as well.
Mm-hmm. Very important to be able to see how you can allow that to transform you and bring out what is within you that's been neglected or talked down to and discouraged over time. So definitely there's a growth aspect with regards to this. And this is all about finding yourself.
And a sense of purpose.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So in terms of spiritual or value-based adjustments, our values and philosophical beliefs are shaken up with regards to the loss of a relationship. And it's normal for us to try to make sense of the loss in order to regain a certain sense of control in our lives. Now, I think it was Janoff Bullman that said that certain assumptions are challenged when we experience the loss of an important person in our lives. And basically, these three assumptions are that the world is basically a good place, that there's a sense to the world, and that you yourself are worthy. So over time, our beliefs can be modified such that we recognize the fragility of relationships and the idea that it's not completely in our control, in that it's a shared responsibility. And in this task, either we learn to recognize the changes and revise what our model of what family or sibling relationships can be, and try to redefine our goals accordingly, give ourselves purpose, as you said, or be held in a dilemma that keeps us stuck with a problem that we can't resolve.
Well, and I think it's important too to recognize that while we have a shared responsibility in the relationship, our thoughts are our own. So we actually control what we think and how much this will take over our thinking. And it's very hard to control it, but I'm not sure everybody recognizes that what goes through your brain, you have a say in.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, it's the empowering aspect of this. And this is why these tasks speak to me so much. And I hope that they'll speak to our viewers, of course, because this is about empowering ourselves. This is about becoming stronger amidst the pain that we have with regards to our sibling relationship. So task number 4 basically is to reassess the role of our sibling in the midst of embarking on a new life. So kind of what we're alluding to, Fern, it's a good indicator that we're embarking on a new path for ourselves is the idea that we're not thinking as much about our sibling and what they would say to us, but rather fostering an openness at building new relationships. So this can mean that we've processed some of our past associated to them and relegated them to a position perhaps of a simple memory. And sometimes this work remains to be done in a counseling setting, of course. And usually that type of work can have to do with finding an appropriate, although small place inside of ourselves with regards to our experience with our sibling. And it's important that we learn to, of course, broaden our perspectives about ourselves such that we can define ourselves differently. And a good question to ask is what is it that our sibling taught us not to be? How can we be contrary to how they saw us? And this can help to distance ourselves from fake labels and move on to actualizing and empowering ourselves through healthy relationships and actions that cause us to grow and learn.
This before, Ali-John, but this whole question of why does it have to be family members who are family? I think that we put so much emphasis on these blood relatives, and sometimes we can get what we need elsewhere. And so it's important to detach with love from those who aren't giving you what you need, wish them well, send out into the universe loving kindness, but then to be authentic and find other relationships that can fulfill you.
I agree, and that's exactly the type of control that we have ultimately over ourselves, because we get to define ourselves differently and we get to frequent the people that matter to us, and we create the relationships that we want with the people that want to do the same with us. So it becomes all the more important to, of course, enable that and give ourselves the opportunities to do so.
So, as you know, one of the elements of my book is about an experience I had cuddling babies who were about to be given up for adoption. And I was very clear why I volunteered at this particular nursery where they were taking babies from adoption to placement. And the reason is I was looking for a sense of family, and I got it in this unique environment. And I think it's important to look and try to seek what you need. And you can find it in unusual places.
That's a great example. I really like that. And, you know, I think our viewers are really going to enjoy your book also, because I had a chance to read that during the holidays, and it was powerful. It was something that really enabled us to move through the process that you went through, that very much resembles what we've talked about also today. And I hope that our viewers will, of course, take away some tools and some insights in terms of where they see themselves and what they would like to work on with regards to this. So I'm really happy that you were able to, of course, be here with me on this topic. This is an important topic for us. All of us go through this type of bereavement, and now we have a bit of a map to see how we can evolve through all this and continue to empower ourselves.
And through this discussion, you can see that you're not alone.
Exactly. We have many of us experiencing a similar experience. So I think that it's good for us to, of course, continue to talk about this and bring this out in the open in just the way we do. So.
Well, thank you. Great to be with you as always.
Thanks for being here, Fern. I really appreciate you talking with you, of course, on these and, of course, other important topics. And we'll talk again soon again.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.